Okay, welcome to Yin. Uh, Today we'll start on hands and knees. It'll just be a transition to get to where we're headed. So come to hands and knees. You're welcome to put some padding underneath the knees if you want something a little extra. If you feel fine without anything, don't feel like you need to have anything. But take some time, stack the shoulders over the wrists, spread the fingers. And let's start with cat-cow. On the inhale, bring the heart forward, lift the tail. And on the exhale, round the whole spine. So starting with movement today, chin in toward the chest. Just keep going at your own pace. Keep the breath slow, controlled. Starting to get into the body and into the breath. Come back to a neutral spine. Either turn the hands so that the fingertips point toward the sides of the mat. If you feel like the wrists are okay with it, you could turn the hands all the way around so the fingertips point toward the thighs. Shoulders stack over the heels of the hands. And then this time you'll take circles. So just circle the shoulders over the wrists, go in the same direction. Start with smaller circles and then you can get bigger. And you can start to get the hips involved too. And switch the direction of the circles going the other way. Might take you a minute to get comfortable, maybe a couple of circles, and then you can get bigger. I was just telling the group before we got started that I'm recovering from COVID. So my voice may be going in and out a little bit. We'll do the best we can. And you'll come back to center. Turn the hands to point forward so you're back in your regular tabletop. Step the right foot forward. So you could put your hands up on blocks if you want to ease your transition, stepping the right foot forward outside of the right hand. So you want a wide lunge. Blocks can go underneath the hands to keep the chest lifted. Here's where we're staying. So you want to find a place where you can easily be in this shape and just focus on the breath. Starting to get into the lower half of the body. Breathing in deeply through the nose and back out. And if you feel like you want to bring the chest down lower, you can, lowering the blocks or coming down onto the forearms. You can also stack the blocks in different ways to find a different height in the chest, maybe bringing the forearms down. Eyes can be looking down or closed. You'll start to bring yourself back up. So, coming back up onto the hands, lifting the chest. If you're down lower, if you're using the blocks, just bring those up to the tallest height. You'll take the right hand outside of the right foot and heel toe the right foot back to center. So, you're no longer in the wide lunge. Start to walk the hands and the blocks back until you can straighten the front leg, lifting the toes on the right foot. And then push that heel forward an inch or two. Find that a little bit of scissoring action in the inner thighs, almost like you're trying to drag that right foot in toward the body, just slightly, so it's not pushing away. And then decide where you want to be with your half split. So you can stay up high with the hands on the blocks. You could lower the blocks. Hands underneath the shoulders is probably a good place to start. If you're feeling like you just can't get right to where you need to be and you want to go deeper into the pose, walking the hands forward is what does that. Hands lower and hands forward goes deeper into the pose. So feel your way into it in your own body. Find that space away from your edge. One where you can linger in the pose with the breath. And you'll start to shift forward onto the sole of the right foot, walk the blocks and the hands forward, come back to hands and knees. So right knee underneath the hip. And we'll just switch over to the other side. So step this left foot forward outside of the left hand. You can lift the blocks up to whatever height makes the most sense on this side. Start out in a gentle place, way gentle, and then find your breath. See how the pose is starting to settle into the body. Moving slow. Starting in a natural place. And then eventually finding yourself into something deeper if the body takes you there. Going with the flow of the body instead of forcing it into something. At any point, if you feel like you need to go deeper, go deeper. Just make sure there's some room left and you're not all the way in. And that right knee can always, the back knee can always scoop back a little bit more, especially if you're right on top of the kneecap. Sometimes that can feel better to be just above it. But if that back hip's tight, you're going to have a more vertical thigh, and that's fine. And let's start to bring ourselves back up onto the hands. If you went lower, you're welcome to keep the blocks underneath the hands if you're using them. And start to shift the hips back. Left hand goes outside the left foot. Heel toe this left foot back to center and come into half splits on this side. So toes lift on the left foot. When you pull the left hip back, it makes the hips so that they're uneven, and you want them to feel like they're side by side. So most of us need to push that front heel forward a little bit. Keep the chest lifted for now. Find where you want the hands. Maybe underneath the shoulders, maybe lower, closer to the mat, maybe touching. Maybe they're going a little bit forward. But no matter where you are, the intensity will build from this point. So you want to make sure you don't go too far in. Better to continue going deeper over time than backing out of the pose over time. And that's something we learn about ourselves the more we practice. So use that as growth if you're finding yourself backing out of the poses. And you'll start to push forward onto the sole of the left foot, walk the hands in the blocks forward, just so you can bring that left knee back underneath you. And then bring the feet over to one side, come to seated on the mat. Have a block near you too, or two, just you can have them outside of the hips. Shift forward so that you're lying down on the mat, heads on the mat if you're using one. You can always do this class without a mat, so don't feel obligated to have one. And then keep the feet about hip width distance apart, toes pointing forward, lining up the heels underneath the knees. We'll come into a supported bridge pose. So you'll want something underneath the hips. Could be a block or two, could be a bolster, pillow, folded blankets. If you have blocks, start with those. Those are easier to adjust. So press into the feet, lift the hips up, slide a block underneath the hips, not as high as you can go. Make sure the block's underneath the hips and not the lower back. And then once you set the hips down on the block, you just rest here. So coming into a gentle back bend. Also giving the legs a little bit of a break, but there is some lengthening in the quads, top of the thighs, even the front side of the hips, pelvis area. And eyes can stay closed or you can just look down. Trying not to move the eyes, keeping them in one spot. So we can start to reset the nervous system, calming things down. Getting ourselves into a more balanced state of mind. And if you feel like you want to adjust the height of the hips, you can go higher. If you're feeling more open for that, skip it if you feel good right where you are, only if the body's calling for it. And you'll start to make your way back down. So if there's a lower level of whatever you're doing, come to it first. You don't have to completely come all the way down to hips on the mat. If you're at the lowest level, just stay there a little longer. And come down to a lower level. That might be hips all the way down to the mat, resting here. Feeling the difference in the elevation of the hips coming back down to where it was before. Then you'll roll over to one side, maybe the right side, just lying in a fetal position, cradling the head and the arm. Using the hands, bring yourself up to seated again. Once you come to seated, we'll come back to hands and knees. And make sure you have a strap nearby within reach from hands and knees, and blocks are also nearby. Once you come to hands and knees, walk the hands forward, almost like you're getting into downward facing dog. So the hands are ahead of the shoulders. Bring the right knee forward as far as you can. So right knee in front of the left, and then bring that right foot out to the side and now cross the leg. So we're just getting into this a little differently. So right thigh crosses high up over the left thigh, still on hands and knees, but now the legs are crossed. You can start to walk the hands back. So some of you can sit the hips right between the feet. Some of you might want a block or two underneath the hips, up to you. But you can take your time coming into this. It actually feels good. So hands down on the mat, start to shift the hips back, keep the hips lifted. Maybe you feel a nice stretch in the glutes, thighs, outer hips, and then eventually hips will be down on something. So blanket, pillow, bolster, whatever you have, maybe a block if that's not too high. And then make sure you're not sitting on the feet. So feet can go wider, so away from the hips, or they can come in closer to the body. Find whatever one feels more gentle. I didn't know I could move this much in this pose. Okay. And then try to get even on the hips. So from here, right knee's on top of left knee, right hand, it just comes out to the right a little bit, maybe a little bit behind you. And then left forearm can come to the top of the thigh, a gentle twist. So you're not going all the way in, but we do want to get some kind of a twist here after that back bend. And also staying in the hips. So we're getting back into the hips again. Close the eyes. And what's nice about the way the shape of the body is you really don't have to go that far to feel the twist. Once you're there, listen to the sound of your own breath. And you'll keep the legs, just unwind the torso so you're pointing forward again. And let's extend the left leg forward, so just the bottom leg, and you can keep the top leg where it is. So it's a little bit more gentle. Grab your strap, unroll it, and you'll grab the strap in the left hand, reaching that left arm up overhead, just letting the strap dangle behind you. And then bend the elbow so you're hanging the strap between the shoulder blades, arms behind the head. Right arm comes out to the side, thumb side down. Bring this right arm behind the back. And once you get it behind the back, you'll start to work the hand up the spine, grabbing the strap when you feel like you found a gentle place for the arms. So lifting the chest, sitting up tall, pressing into both sit bones. You can fold forward if you want to. If you feel better staying straight up, you can stay this way. If you feel like you want to fold forward, you can. But maybe you get a little bit more gentle. So that right hand, the farther down it goes, the more space you have in the upper back. So make sure you give yourself plenty of room in the pose to go deeper if you want to later. And you might just start feeling it naturally. The right hand start to naturally go down the back, and that's fine. Shoulders are away from the ears. Head can be heavy because the neck is relaxed. And slowly start to bring the chest back up if you went forward over the legs. You can set the strap off to the side. Bring the hands back behind you. Right foot goes out in front of you. So legs are extended out in front of you. And then bend the knees, feet wide, windshield wipers. That was a lot for one side. We'll even it out. And you might even feel the work on the left side of the shoulder back area compared to the right. All right, so feet come to one side, come forward to hands and knees, back to tabletop, walk the hands forward way ahead of the shoulders. And then this time, left knee goes forward up toward the hands, left foot out to the right, cross the legs. So slide that left leg back. You can walk the hands back in, feet wide. And then take your time. So hands are forward, hips are pulling back. Maybe you just hover the hips over the mat so you feel that opening in the lower half of the body. And then eventually bringing the hips down between the feet. Feet are as wide or as close as you want them to be to the body, but you're not sitting on the feet at all. Blocks, bolsters, whatever you have underneath the hips to bridge that gap, but make sure that the hips are even on whatever's underneath you. And then from here, left hand comes out to the side. You'll notice it feels natural to just bring it out at a slight diagonal for me. So find where it is for you. Right forearm, left thigh, and a gentle twist. Make sure you can still feel both sit bones, close the eyes, coming into your twist. A really soft, gentle one. And when you keep it soft and gentle, it's easier to keep the shoulders away from the ears, bringing some space and freedom to the upper back, neck area. Just letting the shoulders be heavy. Listening to the sound of your breath. Just like an ocean wave, going in and out. Gently unwind the upper body, bringing the chest back forward. Shift over to the right hip so that you can extend that right leg forward. And maybe it allows you to get that left knee more on top of the right knee. It doesn't have to be perfect. Grab your strap, this time in the right hand, reaching the arm overhead. Bend at the elbow and reach the left arm out to the side, thumb side down. Left hand goes behind the back, and you work those elbows in toward the body and away from one another. Then as you keep the chest lifted, sitting up tall, pressing into both sit bones, maybe you close the eyes and stay here. Or maybe slow as you can, you start to fold forward over the legs. That left hand, the lower it goes, the more space you'll get in the pose. So don't worry if it's sliding down, especially as you fold forward, because it does make it a little bit more intense. And then notice if you're tensing up in the upper body. See if you can release that. Shoulders away from the ears. Settling into the stillness of this shape, this posture. And start to bring yourself back up to seated. Bring the hands back behind you, leaning back. You can set the strap off to the side. Left leg goes out in front of you. Bend the knees, feet wide, knees side to side. And come back to seated with the legs out in front of you. We'll come into a seated forward fold. I'll give you a few options because we're all going to be a little bit different here. If you have a harder time with forward folds or you want a deeper hamstring opening, a strap, looping the soles of the feet with the strap could be really nice. Then you can just start to hinge forward this way. If that's not you, another option I really like is grabbing a bolster, bringing it on top of the legs all the way up against the abdomen, or a pillow, whatever you have, folded towels, that works too. And then starting to fold forward over the bolster with the bolster all the way up against you. Hands can come down so the backs of the hands are on the mat. You can just let the head and the neck go. And if you feel like you're pretty close and there's just a little bit of space, you can bridge that with a block at whatever height makes the most sense, or blankets, or you could do 2 blocks, whatever it is. But you're in a seated forward fold, one that's relaxed. So even if you are using the strap, try not to pull on the strap too much. So we've had the legs bent in all different directions. This will be a nice counter to all of that. And let's start to make our way back up to seated. Set the props off to the side if you're using any. And you'll come forward again to hands and knees. So bring the feet over to one side, come back to hands and knees. If you have two blocks, grab them. You'll want them on the lowest height in front of you on the mat, shoulder width distance apart. You'll bring the hands to the blocks, just flat and wide. Big toes together, knees apart for child's pose, but keep the hands on the blocks. So sit the hips back, and you might need to adjust where the blocks are. So move them around as much as you need to. Make sure they're not too narrow. So I have mine all the way out to the edges of the mat. Forehead comes down to the mat. So this is a little bit different with this child's pose. You're getting a deeper opening in the upper body. You can start to move the head side to side, which is a nice way to soothe ourselves. You're just feeling the forehead on the mat as you slowly move the head side to side. Eyes can be closed. Maybe coming into stillness, shoulders still away from the ears. And you'll lift the head up, take this right arm, thread it through underneath the left arm, and come down onto the right side of the head and just rest here. So changing the upper body a little bit. Left arm still reaching forward with the hand resting on the block. Trying to keep that left shoulder away from the ear. The arm reaching forward, it might want to go up. You'll start to lift the head, come back to child's pose with the hands on the blocks. Forehead comes back down to the mat. Excuse me. Feeling the difference in one side compared to the other. Then lift the head, left arm threads through underneath the right arm. Set the left side of the head down onto the mat. Rest here. And make your way back to child's pose with the hands on both blocks, lifting the head, arms out in front of you, forehead down.
Shoulders away from the ears. Neck is long.
And start to lift the head up, bring the forearms down to the mat, and you'll leave the blocks there, bring up yourself up to hands and knees and come to seated. So you'll want to bolster and your your blocks are really close to where you want them to be. Just adjust them to the tallest height. So they're like big towers at the top of the mat. And then bring them about shoulder width distance apart so they're not too far apart. They're not at the edges of the mat. Take the bolster and just set it on top of those two blocks or whatever you're using for a bolster. And then you just kind of want to press down in the middle and make sure that that's not going to fall if you put weight on it. Once you have that, leave that there. Bring your hips close to this without knocking it all over. So I'm sitting really close, almost without touching it. And then you'll swing the legs up and shift the hips so that the hips are pretty close to the bolster and the blocks. And then you'll start to lie down onto your back, setting up for Shavasana. So close the eyes, rest the head, bring the arms down by the sides, palms face up, let the fingers curl, and settle in here. If you feel like today would be a good day to bring the hands on the body, that's always an option. You could do left hand on the heart, right hand on the belly, or you can do two hands in the same space. That's fine too. And you'll start to wiggle the fingers and the toes. Stretch the arms overhead, getting long from the waist all the way up through the fingertips. Keeping those legs relaxed, feet relaxed. And start to let the arms go. Bring the feet up on top of the bolster, being careful not to knock it over. Roll over to one side, maybe the right side. Coming into a fetal position, cradling the head and the arm. Eyes stay closed. Slowly transitioning out of our Shavasana, hanging on to whatever we need, taking it with us. And then you'll use the hands. Bring yourself up to seated. Be careful of the bolster bridge that's next to you. As you come to a comfortable seat, sitting up tall with the chest lifted, eyes closed. Bring the hands together in front of you. Bow the head. Take a moment, honor and acknowledge your heart and spirit, as well as everyone around you. Bring the head back up, blink open the eyes. Namaste. Oh, that felt so good. I hope you had a good practice. Feels so good to be back to teaching. It's what I truly love to do. I hope you all have a great day. See you next time.